Hope you can cut this down and keep it interesting, babes. All right. Let's do this. Hey everyone, Nate Caauwe here, and welcome to the first episode of Behind the Quarrel, which is a deep dive into the VFX of one of our lightsaber duels. So let's jump right in. Basically the first thing we have to really do before we do anything else is we need to look at the duel and assess where it's at and what needs to be done. And little spoilers, I already have been going through and doing this over the past week, and I have already concluded that it's pretty much a start from scratch scenario with the VFX. There's bits and pieces from a couple of years ago that I can salvage, and we may be able to salvage some of the Saber roto, but we might have to actually just start over on that as well. So I've got right here the basically a side-by-side like what you saw a preview of before. So you'll see kind of how the old edit went, and this is some of the new shots here. And as you can see, we actually cut out the original opening shot and designed it so that we can just jump straight into it. So some of the stuff I've been doing I do kind of like, and most of it I don't anymore. One of the things I'm actually going to abandon completely compared to my traditional way of doing lightsabers is this whole curvy business. When it fans out, we curve out the blade, when in fact the prop blade was probably sitting somewhere like in here. And that's just something that we always did. It was kind of a visual aesthetic of the prequel sabers and stuff, and kind of the sort of sabers that we did 10, 15 years ago when we were doing these. And it's just sort of something that's lingered over the years. And some of the reference I've been using that I really want to go for is the sequel duels. And so if you look, especially like Rise of Skywalker here, there's a lot less of that going on. It's more of a sharp corner there. And we also, of course, have more motion blur happening. They actually kind of let those sabers go translucent a lot more, which is more realistic if you think about it. Our concept, our idea of sabers before was always kind of based on this idea that our theory on the boards was that these things are so bright that when they fan out, when they motion blur, the blade stays solid, which is fine. I mean, if you want to go with that look, and that's certainly been the look of the previous 6 movies. I've kind of taken to just not really liking that as much. I really, really do dig what they've done in the new ones, especially if you look at the daylight sabers in the new films. There's a lot of motion blur in here to the point where it's almost like there's barely any glow coming off of it. It's just we're just really losing that saber against the sky. So one of my theories these days with lightsabers is that, yes, they're bright and glowy, and that's what makes them glow when they're photographed, but they're not so bright that they blow out the camera consistently. So you will get nice moments of translucency when they're being waved around really fast, and I think that mostly has to do with your exposure in whatever environment you're sitting in. So if you're in a darker environment, you're going to be exposing for indoors, and so you're going to have to bump your exposure up a little bit. And this is, broad daylight, so we're exposed for this nice bright scene, and so we're going to really lose the lightsaber quite a bit. And especially when she turns it on, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to tell me that this thing is brighter than the sun, because she's staring right at it. And this is almost a little too far for my taste. And that's, again, it's just a personal thing. You can really do whatever you want in your saber duels. But I like some of this idea. And that's why I've almost been referencing Rise of Skywalker a little more. I think it's perfectly reasonable that Brothers Quarrel would have something erring more on the side of The Last Jedi training sequence here, and less on The Force Awakens. I think The Rise of Skywalker would be kind of a decent halfway point, a decent compromise between the two. I mean, it's daytime. It is obviously a darker scene because it's very overcast and stormy, but it is technically daylight, and they do a bit more of the solid saber stuff here and there. But you do get those moments of really nice blurring over here. You get plenty of like moments of nice glows. And I appreciate a good lightsaber glow. So, yeah, I think I'm probably going to be aiming for something in between Rise of Skywalker and the Daylight Last Jedi stuff. But still taking a lot of cues from the Last Jedi throne room fight for flaring and stuff. So, speaking of flares, the contact flares that we have in Brothers Quarrel, there are bits I like. I like the anamorphic streaking elements that I have. That's as close as I've gotten so far to the real films. It's not anamorphic, obviously, but I don't care. I think it looks cool. I also like the kind of wash that I'm getting for the most part, especially when we're closer to the top of frame. You get nice, nice blue wash happening. I'm not a big fan at this point of how blue it is. Obviously, we went with a more traditional thing back here in 2015. The total blue, I'm not big on now. I think I'm gonna probably go a little more neutral. I particularly like how we get more white flares in the new ones, and that's partly because of the props they had that actually would flash white on set, as far as I know. And the sparks are pretty strong in this because of the weapons that they're fighting. I think saber to saber, it's not going to be that strong. Especially look at Rey and Kylo in here. They're fairly quick. A lot of these sparks are dissipating fairly quickly. They're only on for a few frames, so I think that's going to be achievable through a lot of stock footage. And if we have to dip into like Blender to do some dynamic stuff, I think it's totally doable. And then there's something we get a ton of on the new ones, which I just adore. You can say that's J.J. Abrams' influence if you want. Personally, I think that's what happens when you photograph a very bright object. And I would almost put money on the fact that they were getting some of that flaring in camera with their illuminated props, and that's coming from my own personal experience. I have shot test footage of my light up props with an anamorphic lens on my phone, and the stuff you get right out of camera is pretty impressive. So that definitely influences, it definitely drives you to add more. And I really dig it. I mean, there's a lot of fun details, and this is really fun stuff to do in compositing. I've been playing with this already, this stuff where it hits the top of frame and you get a mirrored flash, or kind of a wash on the opposite side of frame. We've got some of that going on already. Jeffrey whips his saber around, we get kind of a wash up here. And that's what I think makes it really feel like there's a lot going on. Obviously, dirt on the lens. And my absolute favorite shot of any of the sequels as far as lightsaber flaring. This one. This shot has really informed a lot of my saber work over the past couple of years. Because of, all that is a twirl, and look at just the variety of flaring that's happening. You've got, streaking here, when the saber, and this I'll be able to get into and show how you can get that procedurally, and it's super cool. And then, of course, as it streaks around the, as it passes around the edge of frame, you get washes. You get little pings that hit sometimes. And when they go kind of toward the camera, you get something really strong. And especially with Kylo's saber. Yeah, right here, you get just a ton of stuff. There's so much going on here. That's one of my favorite parts about compositing, is doing stuff like that. And you can see we already did some of that on the RVN teaser. So as Ryan would flip his saber toward camera, we'd flare out. We did it on another shot. You can see we were doing sparks and stuff in here, just giving the hint that there were sparks. Some of the anamorphic flaring. I think that was the same flare setup from Brothers Quarrel 2018 that I used. There's more in here, right? And a lot of this is just like, you're doing frame by frame stuff, and we'll get into all that. It's a lot of fun. So, you get a nice flare out there. And yeah, so that's kind of like what we're going for, which obviously, now that you look at the 2018, it's not there yet. And I need to just kind of reset and start over.